Today in Lesson 4, we're relating the things we've learned from the place value system and exponents, and we're relating that to the metric system. In the metric system, you've probably heard of using meters for units of measuring length. This is a meter stick. It's very similar to a yardstick, but it's a little bit longer. You can see that this meter stick is equal to goes up to 100 centimeters. So each one of those smaller units is a centimeter, and 100 of them make a meter. Now you notice that 1 centimeter is broken into even smaller units of measure. Those tiny lines are millimeters. There are 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So if you look at my meter stick, if I have 100 centimeters and I multiply that times 10 for the millimeters, there would be 100 times 10 is 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So these are some of the things we're going to need to know for today's lesson. What I just said, 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters, which is equal to 1,000 millimeters. Okay, now let's take a look at one more thing before we look at the problem set. I want to take a look at the place value chart and relate this a little bit. If we think about 1 meter being in the ones place on a place value chart, and then look at where a centimeter would be. A centimeter is 100th of a meter because it takes 100 centimeters to make a meter. So if I put a 1 in the centimeter column, which is the hundredths place, you can see that 1 centimeter is 100th of a meter. Okay, a millimeter, we said, is 1,000th of a meter. So if I put a 1 in the thousandths place, that would represent 1 millimeter. On the other hand, if I said, well, if I put 1 meter on my place value chart, a 1 in the meters place, and I said, well, how many centimeters is that? Well, if I fill in zeros till I get to my centimeters spot, here's centimeters, I can see 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters. Or 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters. So you can see how the place value chart comes into play with the metric system, because the metric system is a base 10 system, like our place value system. Okay, we're going to take what we've learned, and apply it to our problem set for today. So if you can turn to Lesson 4 problem set, that's where we're going to jump in. And there are a couple things that I want you to put at the top of your paper before we begin. So let's get organized. At the top of your paper, I want you to write what I just had on the board. 1 meter is equal to 100 centimeters, which is equal to 1,000 millimeters. We're going to really need to know that today. And also, let's remember 100, if we wrote that as an exponent, is 10 to the second power, and 1,000 is 10 to the third power. So just a reminder from our previous lessons. Okay, one other thing that will help us before we begin is to realize if I, in converting, move from a big unit to a small unit, this is just abbreviating, a big unit to a small unit. 1 big unit, like 1 meter, the meter's the biggest, then a centimeter, and the millimeter is the smallest. So if I say I have 1 meter and I want to know how many centimeters I have, notice the number becomes bigger because it takes more small units to make a big unit. So when I convert from a big unit to a small unit, I have to use multiplication. But if I move from a small unit to a bigger unit, I divide. I have less bigger units. So I would divide when I go this way. So these are 2 little rules. If you can commit those to memory, it will really help. So let's jump in. The first one has been done for us. It says convert and write an equation with an exponent. Use your meter strip when it helps you. Okay, so what they give us is 3 meters. We want to convert and say how many centimeters that is. Now I'm going to tell you, we're going to do this part first, and this is actually where you just put your answer. I would have switched these 2 columns, okay? So what we're going to do is say, okay, they gave me 3 meters, so I put down a 3. I'm moving from a big unit to a small unit because a meter is bigger than a centimeter. So big to small, I'm going to multiply. So notice they multiplied. Well, what do I multiply by? Well, there's 100 centimeters in a meter, so I'm going to multiply by 100, which is 10 to the second power. Notice I have these notes up here to help. So 3 times 100 is 300, so I come and put my answer right here. 3 meters is 300 centimeters. Okay, so let's look at the next one. 105 centimeters. So I'm going to write 105. That's what I start with. And I want to convert that to meters. So I ask myself, which unit is bigger? This one. I'm going small unit to big unit. Small to big, I'm dividing. So I write divided by. Now what am I dividing by? There are 100 centimeters in a meter, so I'm dividing by 100, or 10 to the second power. Well, if I take 105 and divide it by 100, then that means that my digits get 2 places smaller. So this 1 would move down to the tens, down to the ones place. So if it's in the ones place, then I have a decimal and my 0.5 follows it. So my answer is 1.05 meters. Okay, now this might be a little confusing at first, but you'll get it. Just keep trying. Okay, let's do another one together before you might pause and try some by yourself. Okay, so they give me a starting number, 1.68 meters. So I write down what they give me to start with. Then I decide small to big or big to small. This is a bigger unit to a small unit. Big to small, I multiply. Again, it's meters and centimeters, so I'm multiplying by 100. And then I have to decide on my answer. Well, if I'm multiplying by 100, my digits get 2 places bigger. So this 1 moves to the tens, to the hundreds. The 1 is in the hundreds place. So that means my number becomes 168. So here's my answer column. I started with 1.68 meters, and my answer was 168 centimeters. Okay, now if you feel comfortable, you might pause and try the rest on your own, or if you're not, then you can just keep listening. All right. Next one, 80 centimeters is what I'm starting with. So I can even write that here. And then I come over here and put 80. Okay, now I'm going a small unit to a big unit. So small to big, I divide. And again, it's centimeters and meters, so I divide by 100. Okay, so the 8 gets 2 places smaller because I'm dividing. So moves down to the ones, down to the tenths place, past the decimal. So the 8 moves to the tenths place, and the 0 follows. So my answer would be 0.80 meters. Okay, 9.2 meters is what I'm starting with this time. So 9.2, I'm going big unit to small unit. Remember, meters are bigger than centimeters. So big to small. Big to small, we multiply. Okay. Again, centimeters and meters, so it's by 100. That means my digits are getting 2 places bigger. The 9 moves to the tens, to the hundreds. So that's 900. The 2 follows, but if that's in the hundreds place, I have to have a digit here in the ones. 920. And that's my answer, 920 centimeters. Okay, and then finally 4 centimeters. and I want to convert that to meters. So small unit to big, we divide. 4 divided by 100 is 4 hundredths. 4 divided by 100 is 4 hundredths. So the 4 goes to the hundredths place. Okay, now G says in the space below, list the letters of the problems where larger units are converted to smaller units. Well, remember, larger units, so big to small, that means we were multiplying, right? So which problems up here were we multiplying? Well, that was in letter A, and that was in letter C, and that was in letter E. Those are the ones where we multiplied. Okay, now let's go to number 2. So I'm going to move my board up here. Convert using an equation with an exponent. Again, okay, so let's take a look. How is this different than what we did before? Now I'm seeing meters and millimeters all the way down. Okay, so remember there are 1,000 millimeters in a meter. Okay, and remember 1,000 is 10 to the 3rd power because we have 3 zeros in 1,000. Okay, so that's the exponent we're going to be using down here. But we're doing the same thing. So let me do one and then you pause it and see if you can do the rest before you check. Okay, they start us off with 3 meters. That's my starting point. So I put that here and here. Okay, again, I'm going a big unit to a small unit. So I'm multiplying because if I end up with small units, that means I have more of them. Okay, so it's multiplying. Okay, now remember it's by 1,000 this time, 10 to the 3rd power. So 3 times 1,000 is 3,000. And I put that in my answer blank. Okay, let's do another one. 1.2 meters. So I put that over here. Again, meters to millimeters, big to small, we multiply. Again, by 1,000. My digits are getting 3 places bigger. So this goes to the tens, to the hundreds, to the thousands. So the 1 is in the thousands place, so 1,000, then the 2, and then I have to finish off with 2 zeros to finish my number. So 1,200 millimeters. Okay, next one, we have 1,020 millimeters. And we're going to meters. This time it's small to big, so I'm dividing by 1,000. Which means my digits are getting 3 places smaller. So the 1 is moving 1, 2, 3 places. That means that 1 moves to the ones place. After the ones place is the decimal point, which means the 020 follows it. So 1.020 or 1.02. You don't have to write the last 0 because it doesn't really have any value there. Okay. We'll keep moving. 97 millimeters. Okay, we're going small to big, so we're dividing again by 1,000, which means my digits are getting 3 places smaller. So this moves to the ones place, to the tenths place, to the hundredths place. Okay, so if my 9 is in the hundredths place, that puts it here, and then the 7 follows it. So we have 0.097. Okay, hopefully you're getting the hang of this after so much practice. Okay, so again, pause at any time and try some on your own and then check to make sure you can do it by yourself. Okay, we're going big unit to small unit, so we multiply. Again, millimeters, so it's 1,000. So that 7 is in the ones place. If it moves up 3 places, that would be the tens, the hundreds, the thousands. 7,000, then the 28. So to finish that number, you have to put a 0. And again, at any time, if you need to, just pull out that place value chart. Okay, you can use that until you get comfortable doing it in your head. Okay, and then we have 4 millimeters. And we're going small unit to big, so we have to divide by 1,000. So if you have 4 and you divide it by 1,000, that's 4 thousandths. So that's kind of easier, isn't it? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 4 thousandths. Okay, and then here it says, which of the letters did we go from a small unit to a large unit? So small to big. Remember, small to big, we're dividing. So which one of these did we divide on? Well, we divided on this one, which is letter C. We divided on D. And we divided on F. Okay. Hopefully so far so good. So let's go to the back. Okay. On the back it says, read each aloud as you write the equivalent measures. Write an equation with an exponent you might use to convert. Okay, so this is really the same as what we just did, but let's take a look. I see meters, millimeters, centimeters, meters. Okay, so now they're kind of mixing it up and we have to decide, oh, are we going to use 10 to the second power or 10 to the third power? This first one they've mainly done for us. Notice this is the starting number. They multiplied by 1,000 because it was millimeters. And here's the answer. So you put the answer right here in the blank. This is it. So they did that one for us. So let's look at the next one. 8 centimeters. That's what I start with. Again, small to big. So we divide. And we are dividing by, if it's centimeters and meters, divide by 100. Okay, or 10 to the second power. So 8 divided by 100 is 8 hundredths. So that's our answer. Okay, next one. 42 millimeters. We're going small to big again. So we divide. But this time we're talking meters and millimeters. There's 1,000 millimeters, so we're dividing by 1,000, which is 10 to the third power. The digits are getting 3 places smaller. So that 4 moves to the ones, to the tenths, to the hundredths place. So if the 4 is in the hundredths place, the 2 is after it. Okay? All right, next one. We have 5 hundredths of a meter. We're going big unit to small unit, so we multiply. And again, we're doing millimeters, so it's by 1,000. The numbers are getting 3 places bigger, so that 5 moves 1 place, 2 places, 3 places, to the tens place. If the 5 is in the tens, that's 50. Okay, and very last one, we start with 2 thousandths of a meter. We're going a big unit to a small unit, so we're multiplying, and since it's meters and centimeters, it's by 100, 10 to the second power. So my 2 is getting 2 places bigger, so it moves boom, boom, right here, in the tenths place, 2 tenths. All right, so hopefully, that was a lot of practice. Hopefully you're feeling a little comfortable with that. Okay, so now we have 3 problems real quick before we get done. The length of the bar for a high jump competition must always be 4 7/75 of a meter. Express this measurement in millimeters. Explain your thinking. Include an equation with an exponent in your explanation. Okay, so 4.75 meters. If we want to express that in millimeters, that means we're going big to small, so we multiply by 1,000 because it's millimeters, which means that 4 moves up 3 places to the thousands place. So 4,750 millimeters. And we could say because 1 meter is equal to 1,000 millimeters, because I had to give some kind of explanation there. I multiplied by 1,000. Okay. A honeybee's length measures 1 centimeter. Express this measurement in meters. Okay, well, we already talked about that at the beginning. 1 centimeter is 100th of a meter. Okay, because there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So I could say, because 1 meter is 100 centimeters, I would take 1 centimeter and multiply it, divide it, because you're going small to big. We would say divided by 100. So 1 divided by 100 is 100. So the honeybee's length is 100th of a meter. And the last one, explain why converting from meters to centimeters uses a different exponent than converting from meters to millimeters. Well, it's because there's 100 centimeters in a meter, but it takes 1,000 millimeters to make a meter. So those are 2 different numbers. So we could say, well, 1 meter is 100 centimeters, and 1 meter is 1,000 millimeters. Okay, hopefully that you are comfortable with that, and we will see you next time. Hang in there. Do your best on the homework set, please.